Hey, and welcome back to another video. This is the 13th episode of the story where there are so many things that we as humans are unaware of, or lack an understanding. The bijou are one of those things. Follow the journey of Naruto Uzumaki as he befriends the yokai that was sealed inside of him and, she, helps him grow stronger. Please support by liking and subscribing. Let's start the show. The stadium where the final stage of the Chunin exam was to take place stood in the center of an island just a little off the shore of Kirigakure itself. Docking bays sat at the four cardinal points of this island, the creaking wooden planks connected to the stadium, which was about the same size as a small mountain. Indeed, Sarutobi, who sat in a chair near the very top in the booth reserved only for Kages, judged the oblong stadium to be at least 150 meters across lengthwise and 50 meters in width. Though it was not yet time for the team battles to begin, the stadium was already packed full of people. Just a glance below revealed the first 24 rows to be filled to the brim. The second-tier rows, located further up, was also quickly becoming filled. Several of those sections were reserved for the ninja forces of other villages. He could see his own forces from where he sat, the ninja who had arrived with the caravan, the jonin senseis of those who participated, and the genin who failed to reach this final round. Even so, his eyes were not what they used to be. He could only make them out by the colors of their clothing. A sea of green and blue made for a very distinct sight. On either side of his forces were the ninja from Suna, the left, and Kirigakure, the right. Given that the alliance between Konoha and Kiri had been formalized just the other day, this was to be expected. Now their alliance was a triage. Konoha, Kiri, and Suna. It was Sarutobi's hope that this alliance would help bring more prosperity not just to Konoha, but also to their allies of the sand, who had suffered greatly at the hands of their current treaty with Konoha. It has been a long time since my village has been so festive, Mai Terumi said. She sat on Sarutobi's left, in the same cleavage-revealing blue dress that she wore last time, though this time she was also wearing her kage hat. Her left leg was crossed over her right as she leaned back. Her laid-back demeanor gave her a nonchalant air, but Sarutobi was not fooled by this seemingly innocent demeanor. "Well, you and your people have just recovered from a war several years ago," Sarutobi replied. "Given that it has not been more than 4 years since the Kirigakure civil war came to an end, I am surprised you were able to recover this quickly." "That is true enough." May allowed his comment to pass with a nod. "Though we couldn't have achieved victory so quickly ourselves." The smile on her face suddenly turned devious. "We have Erasure Kazama to thank for that." Sarutobi did not so much as twitch at the subtle jab. Several years ago, Naruto Uzumaki had disguised himself as a man named Erasure, passed himself off as a wandering ninja, and aided Kirigakure in its civil war. Sarutobi had spoken with the young man extensively on this subject. According to him and Akane, Naruto had done this as a means of gaining experience in combat. Their idea was that there was no better way to learn than to experience war. Of course, Sarutobi had scolded Naruto for being so reckless. However, this incident had happened so long ago now that the scolding didn't really stick. What's more, Sarutobi couldn't deny the results. Naruto was powerful, almost frighteningly so. Naturally, though, part of the reason for his power is because he is no longer fully human. Sarutobi didn't claim to understand everything about Akane, Naruto, and their unique circumstances, but he knew that Naruto had become something beyond human. Akane had said that the blonde was now immortal like her. If that was the case, it would eventually cause problems for Konoha, but Akane had assured him that when the time came, she and Naruto would eventually leave and travel to distant lands. He wasn't sure how he felt about that. "I see you two are already making small talk," a voice said behind them. Sarutobi turned as a man walked up to the only remaining chair on this viewing platform. He was of average height, wearing black pants and a black shirt with a hood and mesh under armor. Russet-colored hair, spiky and short, sat like a nest on his head. While this man didn't look particularly extraordinary, Sarutobi knew better than anyone that he was a powerful ninja. Lord Kazekage, Sarutobi greeted with an amiable smile. I'm glad that you could join us. I had debated on whether or not to come, the Kazekage admitted, but when you informed me about a trade alliance with Kiri, I was convinced that such an out-of-the-way trip would be worth it. Suna was located on the opposite side of the elemental nations as Kiri. There were only two ways to get to Kiri from Suna. One was to travel by land, cutting through the land of fire, and then taking a boat. The other was by traveling south, where the land of wind eventually met the sea, and taking a boat all the way around the nation. While it might have seemed like traveling south was the best method, the trip would take about the same amount of time since traveling by sea was slower than a shinobi could run, but traveling by land meant having to stop and rest during the nights. Speaking of our alliance, May began, there are many matters on this subject that I wish to speak with you two about, though I believe they can wait until the tournament has concluded. Sarutobi nodded. I do believe it's about time for the Chunin exams to start. I have to admit, I am greatly looking forward to seeing all the talented ninja that we have this year. As am I, May agreed. I do not think it will matter in the end, the Kazekage said. There might be many talented ninja within the ranks of other villages, but my son Gaara is not a force that mere genin will be able to deal with on their own. I think you might be surprised, Lord Kazekage. Sarutobi wore a mischievous smile. There might be some hidden gems among the genin. I would ask that you don't underestimate anyone until you've seen them all in action. Humph. The Kazekage did nothing but scoff. Sarutobi turned back to the arena. Ten-tailed wolf Enko sat with her compatriots in the stands. Her brats were in the viewing booth reserved for genin participants, so she fortunately did not have to deal with them. Honestly, while Haku was easy to get along with, Naruto and Akane were a pain. The two of them were constantly teasing her, constantly harassing her, and whenever she tried to turn it around on them, they beat her at her own game. It was maddening. How do you think your kids are going to do, Kakashi? Asked Asuma as he took a drag of his cigarette. Enko wondered if he knew that Kurenai hated smoking. He was never going to get a date with her if he kept that up. I'm sure they'll do fine. Kakashi flipped another page of his book, giggled, and then continued talking. They've trained hard. Your kids might be good, Kakashi, but I bet you anything that mine are better, Madogai said with a sparkling grin. In fact, my cute student Lee is a splendid ninja overflowing with youth. I would wager that not even your student, Sasuke Uchiha, is a match for him. Kakashi flipped another page in his book and continued reading. Enko waited for the punch line to come, along with everyone else. It was practically a ritual by now. They all knew what was going to happen. Sure enough, Kakashi stopped reading, glanced at Guy, and then glanced back down at his book. HM. Did you say something, Guy? Right on schedule. Curse you and your hip ways, Kakashi. Enko sighed and shook her head, but then she looked down at the arena, which consisted primarily of water. Several small islands rose from the water's surface. There were also a few large rocks that made her think of stakes jutting from the water. It looks like this terrain gives a heavy advantage to water ninjutsu specialists and people with larger than average reserves. All that water is going to make it easy to use water jutsu. Of course that's not surprising. This stadium is in Kiri, so it's going to be designed in such a way to give Kiri ninja an advantage over others. All of the genin participants were already down below. Enko could see Naruto standing beside Akane and Haku. They appeared completely at ease. Well, Haku looked a tad tense. However, Naruto was happily chatting with some gal in a Kiri headband and Akane watched on with a relaxed smile. So, how do you think your kids are going to do, Enko? Asked Kurenai as two people walked in front of them on the tier below theirs and sat down. It looked like a blonde woman, a raven-haired woman, and a pig. Isn't that Tsunade and her apprentice? I'm pretty sure Naruto and Akane are going to win the whole thing, Enko said. They've got this in the bag. Kurenai raised an eyebrow. It was the only gesture that let Enko know her fellow Jonin was surprised, though she didn't know why. She had been expressing the utmost confidence in Akane and Naruto since long before now. Surely, the other woman expected this kind of answer. Humph. A snort came from in front of them. It was Tsunade. Do you really think that brat has what it takes to win this entire tournament? Get real. I'll admit that kid does seem to have some minor skill for a snot-nosed brat, but I doubt someone as boastful as him will have the talent to back up his words. Enko could have gotten angry on Akane and Naruto's behalf, but honestly, she felt that was a waste, especially since those two were a pain in the butt. She also knew of their real strength. Tsunade was clearly letting her dislike of Naruto get the better of her. Speaking of, just why did Tsunade not like Naruto? Enko had no idea how those two even knew each other. All that said, Tsunade's words did present a unique opportunity. Oh, then would you care to make a wager? Asked Enko. What kind of wager? Tsunade raised an eyebrow. I bet you that Naruto and Akane will win this whole shebang. Enko grinned. If I win. Ichem. How about you have to do what I say for an entire month? Enko had already placed her bets on Naruto and Akane winning this, so she was bound to make a crap ton of money. She didn't need any more. Instead, she wanted to have the chance to boss this woman, who was often hailed as the strongest kunoichi ever, around. It was guaranteed to be therapeutic. Lady Tsunade, Shizun began, I'm not so sure this is a good idea. Fine, Tsunade interrupted her apprentice. I'll play along here, but if I win, you have to give your genin to me for an entire month. Enko didn't debate the merits of that bet for long. Sure, if they lost, then Enko would be in some pretty hot water, but it wasn't like Akane or Naruto would actually lose against a group of genin, even if they were abnormally strong. Heck, it probably wouldn't even matter if one of the other teams had a Jinchuriki. There were no doubts in her mind that Naruto and Akane would emerge from this exam victorious. You're on. Enko held out her hand, and Tsunade took it without hesitation. As Shizun released a weary sigh, as though she was once again resigning herself to watching Tsunade lose, Enko felt a little bit guilty about this. She was basically duping a woman who was so bad at gambling that her nickname as the legendary sucker had spread far and wide. But she only felt a bit of guilt. Ten-tailed wolf Naruto stood alongside the other candidates. There was the team from Kyumo, Akiha's team, the rookie genin from Konoha, a team from IWA, the Suna team, two more Kiri squads, and Kabuto's team. He didn't pay attention to most of them, but he did notice that several people were glaring at him. The main culprits were Gaara and Karui. He found it funny that the two people staring kunai at his back were both redheads. The person who stood before them now, the jonin charged with proctoring this stage of the Chunin exam, was not Utakata. He had plain, generic features that could allow him to easily blend into the crowd. His face was unremarkable, his clothing was standard Kirigakure ninja garb, and his only outstanding feature were his eyes, which appeared sunken in as though he hadn't gotten much sleep. Akane and Haku stood beside him. While Haku still seemed a bit nervous about being the center of attention, or perhaps being surrounded by so many foreign villages, Naruto's mate retained her amused yet calm composure. She studied the stands with her keen eyes. There was a grin on her face, the kind of smirk that he only saw when there was a battle to be fought. I guess she's excited to see if there's anyone fun to mess around with. I want all of you to wave at the crowd, the Jonin proctor said. Naruto couldn't remember his name, though he was sure it had been given at the beginning. This is your moment. All of these people are here to see you, to see the show you put on, so make sure you put on a great show. Naruto debated doing something outrageous to gather the attention of the crowd, but after silently communicating with Akane, who shook her head at his questioning appearance, he decided not to. High above them, on a balcony reserved for the 3 Kages who were attending this Chunin exam, Mei Terumi became visible by stepping up to the railing. She looked down at the genin and the crowd. From this far away, Naruto couldn't see much, but her vivid red hair was easily visible. "Hello, everyone," Mei said, her voice carrying across the entire stadium. She must have been using either a sound amplification jutsu or some form of technology. "Before we begin the final stage of the Chunin exam, I would like to thank everyone who has come to watch these fine genin as they compete for the right to advance in rank. Each one of them has proven themselves, and now, before all of you, they will further showcase their talent to help us determine who among them are worthy of the title Chunin." She clapped her hands. "Now then, let the final test of the Chunin exam begin." Her words were met with a roar of applause. Naruto had to admit that she had charisma, and she had a way with words, too. Even he found himself getting caught up in the enthusiasm brought about by her words, and he wasn't all that invested in these exams. After all, what use did an immortal have for human ranking systems? As Mei Terumi stepped back and retook her seat, the jonin in charge of these exams stepped forward. "All right, everyone, I have a few ground rules to lay out before we begin. First rule, killing is not allowed. If I catch any of you killing your opponents, you'll be automatically disqualified. Second rule, I have the right to judge whether a match is over or not. If I decide that a match is over, then it is over. Winners are determined by the team who has the most genin standing after the 1-hour time limit ends. If all 3 genin are defeated before the time limit, then the other team wins. Seems simple enough. Now, I want you to look at this chart." He held up his hand, which showed a series of brackets. All of the names for the various genin teams were listed on one side. 2 names were connected by a bracket, showing who would fight who. Naruto looked for his team's name, eventually finding it near the very end. So they weren't going to fight until the second-to-last match? That was no fun. The ones who were going first was actually Team 8. They were fighting Team Hitori. Naruto had no idea who that was. "Will Teams 8 and Hitori remain here, while the rest of you go up to the competitor's booth for Chunin candidates," the jonin said. "Heh." Kiba pounded his fists together. "It looks like they decided to let the best go first. Let's do this." "Patience, Kiba." Shino pushed up his glasses. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. This IWA team also made it to the final round, so they must also be tough opponents." "Don't be such a stick in the mud," Kiba grumbled. "We got this in the bag. Right, Akamaru?" "Woof." Unlike the other two, Hinata remained silent. In fact, she wasn't even paying attention to the team that she would be fighting. She was staring at Naruto again. It was something that she'd been doing with increased frequency, and it was really beginning to get on his nerves. Traveling with the other genin, Naruto climbed up to the viewing booth, which was actually quite spacious. There was plenty of room to separate oneself should the desire strike. That was what Gaara did. From the moment he had entered, he wandered over to the wall farthest from everyone else, crossed his arms, and leaned against his gourd against it. The other two he was with, the girl with 4 pigtails and the boy in the cat suit, looked at him for a second before turning their attention elsewhere. "What do you think the odds are of Team 8 beating this team from IWA?" asked Haku. Akane shrugged as she leaned against the railing. "Don't know. I imagine that will depend largely on how strong the team from IWA is. Without knowing their strength, I honestly can't say." Naruto looked down at the arena floor. Kiba, Hinata, and Shino were standing on one side of the arena, while the IWA genin were standing on the opposite side. The instructor was between them. He had raised one hand into the air. Even though he was far away, Naruto could hear his voice as he spoke the words that would start the match. "Are both teams ready? In that case, fight." Ten-tailed wolf Kiba liked to think that he worked well with his team. Sure, there were a few times where they didn't get along. He and Shino sometimes argued. However, he and Hinata normally got along great. Or they had. Something had changed about Hinata, and while he couldn't figure out what that something was, he could pinpoint when the change had started. It was the moment when Akane had confronted Hinata and told her to stop fawning over Naruto. If he was being honest, Kiba kinda agreed with Akane. For as sweet as Hinata was, the way she had kept following Naruto around, hiding behind corners to stare at him, had been weird. Even so, the changes that Hinata had undergone after that confrontation weren't any better, no, they were even worse. Hinata had become cold within the last 2 months since then. It was a startling change. It also meant trouble. Such trouble was being displayed here and now. While Kiba and Shino wanted to fall back and come up with a plan before engaging the enemy team, Hinata left them with no such option. She blasted off, racing across the water's surface at a quick trot. Her linear charge would take her right to Team Hidori. Team Hidori consisted of 2 girls and 1 guy. The male among them was tall and lanky, sort of like a twig. He had black hair that was long on one side and short on the other. It did a good job of concealing the left half of his face. Meanwhile, the right revealed his small, beady black eye, pale skin, and twisted grin. Both girls looked younger than their male teammate, shorter too, and from the similarities in their appearance, Kiba was sure they were related. Siblings maybe. Both were short and cute, with pink lips and a porcelain face that reminded him of a doll. Unlike their partner, who wore standard IWA ninja attire, they wore kimonos with short skirts. The one on the left had a blue kimono, while the one on the right wore red. Damn it, Kiba swore. What is she doing? Whatever she is doing, we need to support her, Shino said. We're a team, and teammates do not leave anyone behind. Let's go. I know that. Come on, Akamaru. Arf. Kiba raced after Hinata, who had already closed a good portion of the distance between her and their opponents. However, this did not mean much, especially since her foes were already going through the hand seals necessary for a jutsu. Earth Release, Earth Flow River. Earth Release, Earth Dragon Bullet. The 2 twins finished their jutsu before either he or Shino could reach them. The first thing to happen was a section of the ground suddenly turning to mud and flowing like a river. Of course, the river had to be aimed at Hinata. Kiba was pretty much in a panic. His teammate was about to get run over by a mud river, and to top it off, a dragon head was forming from a section of that river and shooting muddy projectiles at her. While Kiba was about ready to freak out, and Shino was, well, acting like Shino, Hinata responded with the strange calm that she had been displaying since the beginning of this battle. She stopped running, bent her knees, lowered her torso, and spread her arms out wide. Then she burst into action. 8 trigrams, rotation. She spun around in a circle, blue chakra emitting from her body and creating a large dome that surrounded her completely. The mud slammed into the dome and went around it. Earth bullets blasted against it, crashing like waves against a beach, and broke without doing a single bit of harm. When the mud river and dragon died down, Hinata ended her jutsu and continued rushing forward. What the hell? Kiba wasn't sure what shocked him more, Hinata's cool reaction, or his own shock. Hinata had changed in the past few months. She was colder now, not as talkative, and less inclined to be helpful. Neither he nor Shino knew what happened. Even Kurenai seemed to be at a loss. However, in exchange for losing what seemed, to him, like such an integral part of her personality, she had acquired more skill and talent than ever before. In all honesty, Kiba was not sure he liked this change. Even as these thoughts raced through his head faster than a lightning jutsu, Hinata had already reached the 2 girls. Both of them were in the process of going through more hand seals, but Hinata had no intention of letting them finish. 8 trigrams, 32 palms. Her hands flashed out faster than Kiba could keep track. 2 palms. Over and over her hands blurred, striking the two girls. 4 palms. The girls jerked back and forth, like marionettes being yanked around by a puppeteer, their bodies spasming in time to the beat of Hinata's attacks. 8 palms. Kiba had never seen Hinata use this attack before, though he couldn't deny its effectiveness. The two girls were being battered. Their mouths were open in silent screams of agony. 16 palms. Kiba almost felt sorry for the girls. 32 palms. At least, until Hinata finished her jutsu and the two girls turned into mud. You are now within my attack range. The tall, twig-like man exclaimed as he held his hands in a seal. Earth release, ground tremor jutsu. Kiba would have wondered what the man was talking about, but suddenly, Hinata stumbled forward, falling to a knee. Nothing seemed wrong with her. She wasn't hurt, there was no blood, and she didn't appear to be fatigued. Kiba would have wondered what was wrong, but at that moment, he caught something out of the corner of his eye and was forced to leap back. Earth release, earth armor gauntlets. It was the girl in the red kimono, though there was something different about her. It wasn't her super cute face, which was much cuter now that he was looking up close. It was the gauntlets on her hands. Thick and hard, made of solid brown mass, the gloves were clearly composed from an earth jutsu. They extended all the way up to her elbows. These weren't dainty gloves either. Oh no. Large enough to be about half the size of his head, these things were massive creations that looked out of place on such a dainty girl. The fact that she could move her arms so easily was worrying. You dodged Katrina's attack. The girl, Katrina, he guessed, tilted her head as though unsure of how to respond to her own words. Of course I'm going to dodge your attack, Kiba spat. Do you really think I'll let you hit me? I wish you would have. She shrugged. It would have been much easier on us both. How so? If you had just let Katrina hit you, this upcoming battle wouldn't hurt you so much. Wah! Was all Kiba managed to get out before the girl attacked him again. Ten-tailed wolf standing by the railing, Naruto looked down at the battle taking place between teams 8 and Hitori alongside Akane and Haku. The other genin were present too, of course, but he didn't care about them. His attention was gripped by the battle. What's happening to Hinata? Haku asked out loud, though from the contemplative quality to his voice, he probably wasn't expecting an answer. It looks like she's been paralyzed, but I'm pretty sure she hasn't been attacked yet. Why is she on her knees like that? Hinata was indeed on her knees, breathing heavily, her body shaking as she tried to stand back up. That said, she wasn't injured. It was no wonder that Haku was confused. She's not paralyzed, Akane said. At least, not physically. What do you mean? Haku trailed off as his eyes widened. Genjutsu. That's right, Akane said. Most people think genjutsu only affect eyesight, but that's not true at all. There are many different kinds of genjutsu that affect the other 4 senses. It's just that most people never focus on them because it's harder to use a genjutsu that affects something like your sense of smell for combat purposes. I suspect that Hitori Gai is using a genjutsu that relies on touch instead of vision to distort Hinata's senses. Not touch. Naruto tapped a finger to his ear several times. Hearing. That genjutsu relies on the earth's vibrations to distort one's hearing, which causes a form of paralysis. Of course, since she's standing on the ground, it likely also affects her sense of touch, but the hearing is definitely what's causing her problem. He was still staring at the battlefield as he spoke. What will you do now, Hinata? Ten-tailed wolf Hinata couldn't figure out what was happening. Her Byakugan wasn't working like it should. From the moment this man had unleashed his jutsu, not only had she been unable to see with her Byakugan, but her entire body had grown numb. Now she was on her knees, struggling to keep from falling over entirely. I see that my genjutsu works on even Hyuga, the man said. Hinata glared at him. From the look on your face, I'm guessing you're confused. Allow me to explain. My jutsu is one that creates genjutsu using vibrations within the earth to affect your sense of hearing. These vibrations are so minute that the average ninja can't pick them up since they don't appear on our radar, so to speak. However, if I create enough vibrations, hundreds of thousands of vibrations layered on top of each other, I can cast genjutsu over people to trick their bodies into thinking that something is wrong. The sound is so minuscule that most ninja don't even realize they are under a genjutsu, and it's a lot harder to break out of even if you know you're under it. Hinata was quite smart. While she might not have had the memorization capacity of Sakura, she was able to easily read between the lines and figure what this man was saying. He had channeled his chakra into the earth, creating thousands of small vibrations that generated a sound that was beyond human hearing but affected humans all the same. It probably had something to do with the sound traveling through her feet. She wasn't sure. In either event, it was a genjutsu that her Byakugan could not see through, especially when the very ground was completely saturated with chakra like this. However, the fact that he hadn't moved from his spot did make her question what was going on. This was the perfect time for him to attack. She was helpless, her teammates were battling against those two girls, and he was standing right in front of her. Why didn't he do anything? Unless. As you have probably surmised by this point in time, I am unable to attack you, he said, probably upon seeing the realization set in her eyes. This jutsu requires me to remain perfectly still. If I take even one step, it will disrupt the vibrations I created and the jutsu will fail. All I can do is wait here for my companions to finish your teammates off. Hinata would have frowned, but even her mouth had trouble moving. Sadly, she was trapped within this genjutsu that she had no idea how to break out of. All she could do was hope that Kiba and Shino could finish those girls and break her out of it for her. Ten-tailed wolf Shino frowned as he dodged Tomako's attacks by replacing himself with a bug clone. The girl, now wielding a sword almost taller than her, swung said blade around as though it weighed nothing. She sheared right through his bug clone, which burst into insects that tried to devour her chakra. Sadly, this girl was too smart to fall for such a tactic. She leapt back before they could harm her, swung her sword, which generated a gust of wind that pushed his bugs away. I see that you're an Aburame, she said. I've heard about your clan. You guys use insects that inhabit your body. In exchange for giving them a place to live inside of you, they respond to your will, attacking your enemies and shielding you from harm. Very dangerous. You're definitely the most dangerous opponent on this team. In which case, I should finish you quickly. From what Shino had seen of this girl, she was a speed fighter. She relied primarily on her sword to attack from up close with extreme speed, though she knew a few long-range ninjutsu like the Earth Dragon Bullet and Mud River. However, it looked like those ninjutsu were made to be used in conjunction with her sister. So far their battle had been mostly a stalemate. Without her sister, Tomako couldn't use her long-range ninjutsu. What's more, she wasn't very subtle when it came to her battle tactics at close range. She was faster than him, her swings were strong, and she knew how to wield her sword, but she was too straightforward. It made using misdirection to fool her easy. Actually attacking her was another story. Tomako's battle instincts were good, which had been proven several times when Shino had tried to attack her. He didn't know if she had sensed his killing intent, or if she was just that quick to respond to any sudden movements, but she had thus far avoided all of his sneak attacks. He often used bug clones in conjunction with regular bug ninjutsu. None of them had worked. It was frustrating. However, Shino had a plan. It was always good to have at least one ace in the hole. It should be happening in 3, 2, 1. What is this? Tomako's terrified and agonized screech echoed around the stadium as something sharp jutted from the water and stabbed her foot through the sandal. The object was a large horn. It was poking out from the top of her foot. Blood leaked from around the coin-sized hole. Kikaichu come in a variety of breeds. Shino pushed his glasses up his nose. While all of them are small, there is a special breed that I have created, which has the ability to make the horns on its head grow bigger. It's great for trapping people who are too nimble for me to keep out of reach. He didn't know if Tomako was even paying attention to him anymore. She was crouched on the watery battleground, holding her bleeding foot. While even he could admit that she was bleeding more than he expected, this was within his parameters. I recommend you give up, he said quietly. You are an admirable shinobi, but this battle belongs to me. Like hell it does. Tomako snarled as she stood up and rearranged the grip on her sword. It was an admirable but futile gesture. I can still fight. You are injured, Shino pointed out. So what? Do you know why I targeted your right foot specifically? It's because I know from battling with you that you favor your right foot. Pushing up his glasses again, Shino stared down at the girl. You are a fighter who relies on her incredible speed to defeat your opponents, so if I take away your speed, then you have nothing left with which to fight me. On command, a cloud of bugs suddenly swarmed around Tomako, creating a literal wall that could barely be seen through. If Shino wished it, he could command this wall of bugs to descend upon his opponent. They would devour her chakra until she had so little left that she passed out. I would recommend that you surrender, Shino began again. Now that you are no longer able to move, you cannot hope to achieve victory. Like hell I can't. With a roar, Tomako surprised Shino by swinging her sword so hard that her entire body spun around. She cut through the wall of insects. Shock coursed through him. But however surprised he might have been by this action, it was not enough that he didn't respond accordingly. Commanding his Kikaichu to descend upon Tomako, he watched, absently, as the woman tried to fight his bugs off to no avail. Her screams echoed from within the black sphere. However, even those eventually turned into incoherent gurgles before stopping altogether. Shino waited until he was sure that the Kikaichu had drained the kunoichi of most of her chakra before calling them back. When the bugs left the lump floating on the water, it revealed the body of an unconscious Tomako. The girl lay there, not moving a muscle, as though her entire body had been drained of energy. Which it had. Without sparing the unconscious kunoichi a backward glance, Shino turned around and left. His comrade still needed help. Ten-tailed wolf, you know, I never realized this before now, but Shino is pretty talented, Akane said. I mean, in terms of power, he's lacking, but he has a great battle sense, and his ability to think several moves ahead is impressive. Naruto hummed as he watched Shino run off to help Hinata, leaving Kiba to fight on his own. Had this been before Hinata's change, he would have said that helping her first was a logical decision. She hadn't been that strong before. Shino was clearly thinking along those lines. However, he should have helped Kiba first. Shino is pretty capable as a shinobi, but that won't be enough for him to get promoted, Naruto said at last. What do you mean? Asked Haku. Chunin aren't just people who can fight. They are also leaders who know how to work with their squad mates. Why do you think this tournament was made into a team battle instead of individual fights? It's because we're supposed to showcase our teamwork, not just our talent in one-on-one combat. He continued looking down as Shino tried to attack the lanky IWA shinobi with his bugs. Thanks to his efforts, the Genjutsu Hinata was underbroke, but Naruto was pretty sure this wouldn't be enough for him to get promoted. He finished his thoughts by saying, right now, they aren't displaying any teamwork. Ten-tailed wolf Kiba growled as he leapt backward. It allowed him to avoid being squashed like a bug by Katrina, who was so stupid strong it wasn't funny. Not in the least. As he eyed the massive crater that his opponent had made in the island that he'd been standing on with her gauntlet-clad fist, he felt a deep chill race up his spine. I'm done for if she hits me even once. This girl was officially a threat. She was insanely strong, was completely unpredictable, and didn't seem to mind tearing apart the landscape to get at him. Several islands had already been demolished by her fists. Kiba raced onto the water in an attempt to put some distance between them. Sadly, because the vast majority of this terrain was water, he and Akamaru couldn't use their man-beast clone technique. Akamaru couldn't walk on water yet. It was a skill that he was slowly being taught. However, it wasn't something that could be taught in a day, or even a month. Skating along the water's surface, Kiba tried to keep Akamaru from falling off his head as he dodged Katrina's deadly attacks. Water exploded all around him as the woman launched her fists his way. Katrina preferred attacking from above. She leapt into the air and flew toward him with startling speed. He wondered if it had something to do with those gauntlets of hers. They had to weigh a ton. Maybe they were so heavy that she was pulled down faster. Either way, he continued to move. Water exploded around him on all sides. A strike to his left sent him skidding across the surface, forcing him to readjust the chakra distribution to his feet so he wouldn't fall. His instincts suddenly screamed at him. Kiba reversed course, which proved to be a good idea because Katrina fell on the spot he'd been standing gauntlet first. A massive geyser of water shot from the air. Kiba hopped backwards several times. Just as he finished his third leap, Katrina exploded from within the geyser like a deep-sea dragon, dashed over to him, and attacked using a more straightforward frontal assault. You are quite agile. Katrina thrust out her left fist. Kiba sidestepped. The air before him was strong enough that it pushed against his body, creating a heavy resistance. Katrina is impressed. Kiba bared his fangs. You'd be even more impressed if I could use my regular jutsu. And why can't you? None of your business. Leaping back, Kiba tried to put some more distance between them, but that was impossible. Katrina stuck to him like glue. What's more, the longer they fought, the closer her punches came to hitting him. He didn't know if he was getting slower, or if she was just figuring out his pace. Just as he was realizing that something needed to change, that he needed to adjust his style and fight back, water exploded in front of him as Katrina slammed into it. The wave pushed him back, which caused the world to tilt as he lost control over his chakra. His left foot sank into the water, and then the world went black as a large gauntlet crashed into his face. Ten-tailed wolf Akane, Haku, and Naruto winced as Kiba went down hard. A massive splash went up as he struck the water's surface, skipping along like a stone lobbed by Mato Guy. He crashed into the wall at the far end of the arena. The wall broke around him, cracking and denting in the shape of his body. With his eyesight, Naruto was able to see that he was unconscious from the way Kiba's eyes were rolled into the back of his head. That's going to hurt their standing, Akane said. Haku nodded. I think you're right. Not only did Kiba lose in one-on-one combat, showing that he's not as strong as that girl, but Shino's decision to help Hinata will also be a demerit against them during the judging process. I wouldn't be surprised if that decision costs Shino a place as a Chunin. It will definitely cost him the title of Chunin, Naruto said. Look there. Haku and Akane turned their attention back to the other side of the arena, where Shino and Hinata now found themselves fighting two separate one-on-one battles. Ten-tailed wolf Shino didn't have time to regret his actions. While he had managed to stop Hitori's genjutsu and free Hinata, now he was caught within a fierce battle with Katrina. If Tomoko was all about speed, then Katrina was pure, brute strength. Every punch from her gauntlet-clad fists demolished rock formations or blasted water into the air like a boulder being dropped into a lake at terminal velocity. Also, unlike Tomoko, who had issues fighting over the water, Katrina had no trouble fighting over the water. The problem with a water battle was that his bugs weren't as effective. He could make them swarm around his opponent, make them latch on and begin draining chakra, but all someone had to do to stop that was submerge themselves. His Kikaichu couldn't swim, after all. Only his new variation could, and Katrina seemed more aware of it than Tomoko had. She dodged all of its sneak attacks with ease. Naturally, this meant Shino was in a bind. "You are not quite as nimble as the dog ninja," Katrina said as she descended from above. Shino leapt back. The girl hit the water with a splash that created a massive wave, which Shino jumped over. He didn't realize it was a trap until Katrina leapt from within the water. But you have a battle instinct that he lacks. With a grimace, Shino created a wall out of his Kikaichu as Katrina threw a punch. There was a loud explosion, followed by a shock wave as the insect wall blew apart as though it had never existed. However, the wall had served its purpose. The resulting shock wave sent Shino further away from Katrina, who was in turn pushed back to the watery battlefield below. As he landed back on the ground, Shino pulled out a kunai and a paper bomb, which he wrapped around the kunai's hilt. Katrina was already rushing toward him. He tossed the kunai at Katrina. Then he made a hand seal and waited. When Katrina raised one of her gauntlets to block the kunai, he channeled chakra through the seal and shouted, "Release." An explosion went up, fire and heat blasted Katrina in the face. Even though he was several meters away, the hot blast of air hit his face as well. It was a good thing he was wearing goggles, or that might have hurt his eyes. Shino couldn't see anything because the explosion had engulfed his opponent, but surely, an explosion of that power would send even someone like this girl flying. Those were his thoughts until Katrina shot from inside of the fire, her body covered in minor burns but mostly unharmed. He barely had a moment to ponder the situation before she was on him. In a final act of desperation, Shino created a wall out of his Kikaichu, but it was a futile gesture. Katrina leapt over the wall and crashed into him from above. He heard, more than felt, Katrina's fist as it plowed into his stomach. Perhaps his mind had yet to catch up with his body. He couldn't feel anything. Then his feet suddenly left the ground and he went soaring backward, the air rushing around his face, the wind howling in his ears. Lights and color streaked past his vision. It wasn't until he struck the water that he felt the pain. It started in his stomach where he had been struck, though it didn't remain there for long. It spread through his body. His back groaned as the air was knocked from his lungs, his shoulders cried out as he struck something hard enough to dislocate them, and his mind went white from the pain overloading the nerves in his body. And then he stopped. Shino belatedly realized that he must have been on dry land, which was the only explanation for why he hadn't sunken into the water yet. He didn't have the concentration necessary to make himself float. The sky overhead was bright blue, but the edges around his eyes were distorting it, like what happened when you looked through a curved glass. A figure appeared over him. He blinked. It was, of course, Katrina who stood over him, her calm gaze bearing down on him. The cool expression on her face gave nothing away. It showed neither pity nor joy. "You gave Katrina a bit of a hard time," she said. "But it's over now." Shino understood what she meant, that he was beaten, that she had defeated him, which he couldn't dispute. His body did not have the strength to move. The proof was in how, rather than scramble to his feet to continue fighting, he remained on the ground despite how she could easily kill him if that was her intent. This battle was lost. He opened his mouth to surrender. "You're right," a voice said before he could. "It is over. For you. 8 trigrams, 32 palms." Shino turned his head at the same time that Katrina turned around. Both were just in time to see Hinata rush at Katrina faster than the other girl could blink. 2 palms. Shino had no idea how Hinata had come over here so fast, though he supposed it meant Hitori simply wasn't that good. Maybe he only had that one jutsu going for him. Once the jutsu was disrupted, Hinata had easily overcome him. That was probably what happened. 4 palms. Of course, speculation was pointless by this point. It wasn't like what happened mattered anyway. If he was being honest, he was just glad that Hinata had decided to come over and help him. 8 palms. As he watched Hinata strike Katrina with a series of palm thrusts, he wondered how and when she had become so powerful. Shino knew that she had grown colder, less emotional, but they hadn't done any major sparring in a while, so he hadn't realized she'd grown this much. He was grateful in some ways. On the other hand, it was worrying. 16 palms. Hinata's hands were barely visible as she struck Katrina over and over again. The IWA ninja's body jerked back and forth as almost invisible hands dealt chakra-induced damage. Shino could already see the effects from the blood dripping down Katrina's mouth. The gentle fist, the fighting style of the Hyuga, dealt internal damage by sending foreign chakra into the body. Skilled practitioners could even damage an opponent's chakra coils. 32 palms. With the speed of her strikes coming in even faster now, Hinata reminded Shino of a whirlwind. By the time she finished her assault, Katrina looked like she had been put through the ringer, like she'd been subjected to a mason's mallet. Shino could tell, even from this awkward angle, that Katrina, with her head lowered and her shoulders slumped, was already unconscious. Hinata pushed the girl over, sending her toppling to the ground. There was a moment of silence as everyone digested what had just happened. Even Shino wasn't entirely sure what was going on, but then, the proctor for this portion of the exam made his announcement. Team Hitori is no longer able to battle, therefore the winner of this tournament is Team 8. Ten-tailed wolf. While most of the audience broke out into applause over the intense fight, none of the Kages save Sarutobi applauded, and that was mostly because his ninja had been the ones fighting. In truth, this battle had left him just slightly disappointed. I do not believe any of the genin from Team 8 are ready to become chunin, he said at last, still clapping to show his support. Most definitely not, Raza, the 4th Kazekage, agreed. While the Aburame initially showed promise as an individual shinobi during his battle against Tomako, his decision to help the Hyuga over the Inuzuka was not a sound one. The Hyuga was in no immediate danger. On the other hand, the Inuzuka was clearly outmatched. Down below, several medics came onto the field bearing stretchers. Kiba and the members of Team Hitori were placed on the stretchers and taken away. That left Hinata and Shino as the only members on the field, though neither of them did anything in response to the cheers, not even wave at the people cheering for them. I've heard that Hinata Hyuga was a shy individual. Since when has she been so stoic? I have to agree, Mei said with a disappointed sigh. Had Shino rescued Kiba first, they could have double-teamed Katrina and defeated her easily, and then Hitori would have been easy to deal with. Instead he went to rescue Hinata. That cost him one of his teammates. Of course, had the Hyuga not rushed their adversaries like she did, none of this would have happened to begin with, Raza added. While it is hard to say who would have won, had the Konoha team worked together, I believe their individual talents would have granted them a much cleaner victory than the half-hearted one they achieved here. Even though it pained him to admit that Raza was right, Sarutobi could not disagree. He didn't think Team 8 had terrible teamwork, but it was clear that they had let themselves get drawn into a conflict they were not in charge of. Even though they had won, it wasn't due to their talent as a team, but luck. Even if luck was just another factor in the shinobi world, a team that won on luck was not worthy of the title Chunin. Maybe they will be ready next year, he consoled himself. Ten-tailed wolf up in the stands, Kurenai and Enko sat with their companions and looked on as Hinata and Shino made to leave the arena floor. Conversations were taking place all around them. It seemed a lot of the people were excited by the fight, but for those who were experienced ninja, this battle had been a disappointing one. Well, Enko began. There's always next year, right? Kurenai smiled. I didn't really think my team was ready for this, and this fight merely proves it. While their individual abilities are fine, their ability to work as one needs a lot of polishing. When we get back home, I believe I'll start training my genin in team drills. They are only newly minted genin. Kakashi flipped a page of his book, giggled, and then continued. While we espouse teamwork as the greatest asset a ninja has, it's not like genin are trained to fight as a unit right off the bat. Our curriculum only teaches the theory, not the practice. That is a skill one can only learn by working together on numerous missions and going through a lot of drills. Working as a team was something that couldn't really be taught. It had to be learned through experience. By experiencing what it was like to work as a team, ninja became more adept at reading the social cues from their fellow ninja, which was what allowed them to work together. New genin, who had yet to really work in units, weren't well versed in this yet. My eternal rival brings up a good point, Guy said. This is another reason I held my team back a year. They're all talented individuals, but their teamwork was lacking. I'm fortunately not worried about my team's teamwork, Asuma said, puffing away on his cigarette. In fact, that's the one thing they are really good at. Sadly, while their talent as a team is phenomenal, they aren't as powerful individually. Don't forget that none of your brats have a lot of chakra either, Enko added with a grin. I'm not sure they would last in a prolonged battle over the water like this. Don't remind me, Asuma groaned, causing Kurenai to smile and Enko to snort with repressed laughter. Ten-tailed wolf, will teams Guy and Aqua come down to the arena, the proctor called. At his words, Niji, Ten-Ten, and Rock Lee picked themselves up and began making their way toward the exit. Likewise, Team Aqua, one of the teams from Kirigakure, began moving as well. Team Aqua was one of the teams that none of them knew anything about. Naruto hadn't paid much attention to them before now. However, the team consisted of all women. Their leader was a gal with bright orange hair, a lovely color if Naruto did say so himself, and a petite figure. She didn't have much of a chest, which was only covered by a thin leather strap the same color as her hair. Likewise, her shorts stretched tightly across her ass, conforming to it and showing off her butt cheeks and camel toe. It was probably designed that way to distract people. She had several pouches strapped to a belt and a tanto attached to her lower back. The grin on her face was cheerful. It reminded Naruto of someone, though he didn't know who. The other two were also quite the sight. On the Orangehead's left, a girl with blue hair walked with a calm sway of her hips, which were covered by a skirt that swished with every movement. Her shirt vaguely reminded him of a priest's garb. The sleeves were loosely connected by several threads. Longer than average, they hid her hands, which Naruto suspected was where she carried her weapons. Walking opposite the blue-haired girl was a slightly older woman, perhaps someone in her late teens, with black hair and a pale face. She had ruby red lips and dark eyes. Her kunoichi garb was all black, a long-sleeved shirt with a sleeveless leather vest worn over it, and black shinobi pants. 2 katanas were strapped across her back, though there was something odd about them. The only color on her entire body were the red wrappings tied around her calves, which disappeared into a set of standard black sandals. Good luck, Ten-chan. Akane shouted as Ten-Ten and the others were leaving. If you win, I'll give you a big victory kiss. Ten-Ten's response was to blush and scurry out of the viewing booth. While everyone looked at Akane oddly, aside from him and Haku who were used to it, Naruto's mate grinned and turned back to where she could watch the battle. Who do you think will win this one, Naruto? She asked. Pausing as he turned around and looked at the arena, Naruto considered the two teams before shrugging. I don't know. I'd like to say Team Guy would win, but I have no idea what kind of strength Team Aqua possesses. We never saw them battle against anyone. It will ultimately depend on what kind of talent they have, though either way, I'm sure Team Guy will put on a good show. Yes, I'm sure you're right, Akane said just as the two teams stepped onto the arena, to the cheers of the spectators who clearly expected another brilliant fight. Teams Guy and Aqua moved to stand on opposite sides of the arena and warily eyed each other. The stadium settled down as spectators grew silent. A new tension settled over the atmosphere as everyone looked on in anticipation of the coming match. Are both teams ready? Asked the proctor. He received nods all around. Then let the second battle of the Chunin selection exams commence. And fight. Naruto was paying a lot more attention to the battle between Teams Guy and Aqua than he had been Teams 8 and Hitori. Unlike Team 8, who wasn't well versed in teamwork, Team Guy clearly understood the fundamentals of battling together. While Niji and Rock Lee rushed forward in a frontal assault, Tenten hung back and kept the members of Team Aqua from using any ninjutsu by peppering them with kunai and shuriken. Her accuracy was such that every time they tried to form hand seals, she could throw a kunai at their hands to keep them from completing it. I wonder if Tenten's parents were seers, Kane pondered out loud, humming thoughtfully several times as she, too, watched the battle. "Why do you say that?" asked Haku. "Because her accuracy rating is 10 for 10. Haku facepalmed. Down below, Rock Lee and Niji had reached the two kunoichi in front. While Rock Lee attacked the older woman in black, Niji went after the one dressed as a priest. Naruto blinked and a pair of blades emerged from the voluminous sleeves of the priestly robes. The girl, her blue hair whipping around her, spun in an elegant circle as she sliced the air in front of her. Niji was forced to leap back. The front of his own outfit was cut, a thin slice that traveled across the length of his shirt. Now those are interesting weapons. Akane rubbed her chin as she studied the curved blades. It's been a while since I've seen someone wielding a pair of tonfa blades. Those are pretty tough to use since they present a danger to the wielder as well as the wielder's enemy. I've never seen a weapon like that before, Haku admitted. They aren't widely used because they're so difficult to learn. Naruto narrowed his eyes as Niji tried to get in close but was, once more, forced back when the woman swung her blades faster than most human eyes could track. It's easier to learn how to dual-wield short swords. Tonfa aren't really practical either since you can't use ninjutsu when wielding them. It's not like she can sheath them once they're out. Of course, if she specializes in using tonfa, then it doesn't matter if she can use ninjutsu or not. That girl is definitely an expert, Kane added. Though she obviously lacks experience. Agreed. Aside from Niji's battle against the tonfa blade wielder, Rock Lee had engaged the older woman in a battle of taijutsu versus ninjutsu. The woman sped through a variety of hand seals before the water around her suddenly rose and transformed into a water dragon. It rushed at Rock Lee, who leapt over it. He slammed a fist into the dragon's body as he descended. The jutsu exploded in a shower of water droplets. Landing back on the ground, Rock Lee was forced to once more utilize his talent at taijutsu to avoid the water bullets that the woman spat at him. Unlike most water bullet techniques, this was a continuous barrage that didn't just fire bullets one after another, but also shot bullets that varied in size. She launched everything from projectiles the size of a head to bullets no bigger than her finger. Naruto would have wondered how she was doing it, but then he noticed how she'd change hand seals every so often. "I see," Naruto said in a murmur. She uses the traditional hand seals for a regular water bullet jutsu, but then she can vary the size by changing her hand seal while keeping the jutsu going by continuously feeding it chakra. I've never heard of anyone doing that. She must have monstrous reserves. Akane crossed her arms and furrowed her brow. Maintaining a jutsu like that consumes chakra quickly, never mind changing the size and density of a jutsu. Unless she has the same amount of chakra as a jonin or perhaps even a kage, she'll run out of chakra before much longer. Naruto was betting on the girl just having a lot of chakra. No ninja would be dumb enough to use a technique that had a heavy chakra consumption unless they had a lot of chakra to spare. That said, it was hard to tell how much she had. As the woman continued laying down a barrage of water bullets, she knelt down on the ground. The bullets suddenly ceased. Rock Lee, taking this to mean the woman was finished, rushed forward. However, during that time, the woman had finished her hand seals and placed her hands on the water's surface. The moment she placed her hands on the water, a massive swell rose up and was soon towering over Rock Lee, who only now seemed to realize what kind of predicament he was in. He skidded to a halt as the giant wave of water curled over. Turning around, he raced away from the wave just as it crashed down. With the woman riding on the wave like a surfer, she and the water chased after Rock Lee. She had gone back to shooting water bullets at the Konoha genin. This slowed down Rock Lee, who had to move left and right to avoid being hit, which meant that the wave was also slowly creeping up on him. If he's not careful, he's going to be overtaken. Akane clicked her tongue several times. I doubt he'll be able to escape like this, Naruto said. He'll have to try something else. If I were him, I'd go for a frontal assault, Haku announced. If he can leap over the wave, then he can attack his opponent directly. Of course, he also has to avoid those bullets, but that's the biggest problem I can see. There are other problems, Akane said. Such as? Haku raised an eyebrow. Take a look at that girl's weapons. Akane pointed to the back of the kunoichi's outfit. She hasn't even touched her katanas yet. How much do you want to bet that she's more of a kenjutsu specialist than a ninjutsu specialist? I don't take sucker bets, Naruto said. TCH. Neji and Rock Lee fought their opponents up close, but Tenten was dueling against the orange-haired gal in a long-distance fight. The one with orange hair gripped the tanto fiercely in one hand. She used it to knock away all of the projectiles sent her. Meanwhile, she was making hand seals with her other hand. Oh. That girl can use one-handed seals like you, Haku, Akane said. Well, it's not too difficult if you know how to arrange your fingers appropriately. Haku was frowning at the girl, though whether in curiosity or displeasure, Naruto couldn't tell. Anyone can learn how to make one-handed hand seals, provided they are willing to put in the time and effort needed. That said, it does have several drawbacks like not being as efficient. It forces your fingers to contort in ways they weren't really meant to. I spent years practicing before I became proficient enough to use them in combat. Naruto shifted his weight from foot to foot as the woman stopped on a specific hand seals. Since he didn't much care for actual ninjutsu over pure elemental manipulation, he would never learn how to use one-handed hand seals. That said, the moment the orange-haired gal finished making her seals, he froze and gripped the railing at what happened next. Isn't that, he began. It is, Akane said as Haku's eyes widened. That girl is using ice ninjutsu. Ten-tailed wolf, I had no idea that girl was a wielder of ice release, Sarutobi mused. I had heard that members of the Yuki clan were all annihilated before the Kirigakure civil war. Down below, the orange-haired had finished creating her hand seals, and the water all around her had risen up and taken shape. Needles. They were about the same size as senbon. The needles soon hardened, turning from plain water into ice. It was not long after this transformation took place that the woman made another hand seal, and all of the ice senbon were launched at Tenten. I believe that is what most of us thought, Mei said. However, you know that rumors tend to be greatly exaggerated. Oryuki comes from a small village of Kekkei Genkai users that had banded together during the Fourth Mizuki's purge and hidden themselves away. When I announced that the civil war had ended, I sent letters to every corner of the land of water, informing them that those who wielded Kekkei Genkai would be welcomed with open arms. She was one of a handful of people that her village sent. Indeed. It seems there are still many talented individuals within the land of water. Sarutobi nodded several times. The Kazekage said nothing. To her credit, Tenten did not react with surprise. She remained calm as she reached behind her back and pulled out a scroll, unfurling it in midair as she bit her thumb, and then swiped her now bloody appendage across a complex seal written on the paper. What came from within the seal was several hundred kunai, all of which flew forward with strangely unerring accuracy, striking the senbon. Because those senbon were naught but ice, the kunai shattered them and continued on. They flew for Oryuki, who went through another set of one-handed hand seals as she fended off the kunai with her tanto. Then she slammed her hand onto the ground. A wall of ice rose up around her, protecting the girl from the rest of the barrage. Meanwhile, Niji and Rock Lee were still fighting hard. They couldn't get close to their opponents, who used their blade tonfas and ninjutsu to keep the two from making any real headway. Even so, the pair kept on the pressure, not giving an inch. It seems my ninja are not the only ones who have a lot of talent, Mei Terumi mused. Those 3 genin of yours are quite skilled. Sarutobi smiled. I appreciate the compliment. They are indeed a talented team. Madogai has done a great job training them. I'll agree that they have talent. The Kazekage suddenly intruded. However, I'm afraid talent only gets one so far. No matter who wins this fight, once they come up against the incredible power that Gaara wields, they will fall. Now. Sarutobi raised a hand in a placating gesture. Let's not make such a hasty decision. Even if your son is a Jinchuriki, there is a chance that he might meet someone he's ill-suited to battle. Humph. Ten-tailed wolf. The battle had taken an interesting turn, that much was certain. Naruto had never expected to find another wielder of the ice release Kekkei Genkai. Now the long-range battle between Tenten and the orange-haired girl had taken on a new dynamic. It was no longer a matter of 2 ninja trying to keep the other from influencing the individual fights between Niji, Rock Lee, and their 2 opponents. It was an all-out war. In a 3-on-3 battle, the one with superior teamwork normally won. Since these teams were all genin, their teamwork wasn't at the same level as most Chunin teams, but they did a decent job with basic tactics. Team Guy relied on Niji and Rock Lee for close-range combat, while Tenten hung in the back and provided long-range support. It was a good strategy. Against a group of bandits, such a tactic would have worked just fine. However, they weren't up against bandits this time. They were fighting ninja. Team Aqua looked like a more well-balanced team than Team Guy. The girl that Niji was fighting was a close-range combat specialist, the one Rock Lee fought seemed talented in both close and mid-range ninjutsu, and the girl Tenten was battling could provide excellent long-range support. She kept Tenten from helping her team. At the same time, it looked like her teammates were slowly hemming Rock Lee and Niji toward her. Speaking of Rock Lee, he had managed to bust through the giant wave. Rather than trying to leap over it, he had run toward the far end of the arena, ran up the wall, and leapt off after the wave crashed into the arena wall. He had tried attacking the girl from above, but she had exploded into water seconds after his fist made contact. She had replaced herself with a water clone. Now the 2 of them were battling it out several meters from where the orange-haired gal stood. She had unsheathed her katana and coated it in water. Just like with her water bullets, the water surrounding her katana could change in length, width, density, and elasticity. They would extend and attack Rock Lee from a range, and sometimes they would become loose and strike at him like a whip. Not only was it versatile, but there was no way to predict how she would attack next. Rock Lee was doing his best to avoid being hurt and close the distance, but his opponent was really good at keeping him from reaching her. If Naruto had to assess her fighting type, he would have said that she was the sort who excelled at fighting taijutsu users. The way she never let Rock Lee get too close showed she had experience when it came to dealing with ninja like him. She had probably spent a lot of time sparring the blade tonfa wielder. While his teammate was having a hard time getting close, Niji seemed to have finally gotten a hand on his opponent's attack pattern. He had already closed the distance and was attacking with the traditional palm strikes and finger jabs of the gentle fist style. His opponent did a good job of fending his attacks off. It seemed she had some kind of armor underneath her kimono because she was using her forearms to block his attacks. What's more, she was still perfectly capable of launching counterattacks, though they did little good since Niji was far more nimble than her. Perhaps owing to Niji's talent as a user of the gentle fist, but every attack sent his way that was not outright dodged was blocked. Niji would strike the flat end of her blades with his fingers. Not only did this push her weapons away from him, but it knocked her off balance. Niji and Rock Lee are being led into a trap, Akane said at last. You noticed that, too, huh? Naruto chuckled. I'm not surprised. Haku bit his lower lip. Do you think that Ice User is going to do what I think she is? It looks like it, Naruto said. Just as he finished speaking, as though to prove that he was right, Niji and Rock Lee found themselves standing back to back when, almost without warning, their two opponents leapt away from them and a large dome made entirely of ice mirrors sprang up around them. Ten-tailed wolf Rock Lee and Niji looked at the mirrors that now surrounded them on all sides. About 60 or so in total, each mirror gleamed brightly in the light, though they were not actually mirrors but slabs of ice. There didn't seem to be any way out. The mirrors were packed too closely together for a human to slip through. The orange-haired girl who had erected the mirrors had already slipped inside one of them, and now all of the mirrors were showing her image reflected on them. Can you tell which one is the real one? Asked Rock Lee. No. Niji shook his head. It looks like she has evenly distributed her chakra between the mirrors, so I can't tell which one is real and which is fake. Your eyes will do no good here, the orange-haired girl said, and her voice echoed all around them, making it impossible to know where it was coming from. I've heard that the Hyuga clan has incredible eyes that allows them to see chakra, and that some have such good eyes that they can even see the chakra points on the body. However, none of that matters if I saturate this entire area with chakra. TCH. Clicking your tongue at someone isn't nice, Niji. I would suggest you surrender, the woman continued. We'll never surrender. Rock Lee shook his fist at the woman. Though it was unknown to anyone except the kunoichi in question as to whether he was shaking his fist at the real her or just a reflection. Then prepare to fall. Neither Rock Lee nor Niji were prepared for what happened next. All of the reflections disappeared, and then the two of them were suddenly attacked from all sides at once. Cuts appeared on their clothing and skin. Blood welled up along tiny slash marks, trailing down their flesh. However, neither of them could see their opponent. It was as if the cuts had suddenly just appeared. By the time the small assault was over, Niji and Rock Lee were kneeling on the ground, their body littered with small nicks. I've purposefully avoided harming you too much, but that can change soon if you don't surrender, the girl said. I recommend giving up. What is going on? Asked Rock Lee. How were we attacked from so many angles at once? Is this girl using clones? No, that isn't it. Niji shook his head, winced, and then wiped some blood away from a cut on his cheek. She's not using clones. She's just moving really quickly between the mirrors. My guess is that bouncing from mirror to mirror increases her speed to the point where it's almost like she's teleporting. It's too fast for our eyes to track, and because she's so fast, she can attack us so quickly it seems we're being struck from many different sides at once. However, this is nothing but speed. You're awfully intelligent, the girl said. However, just knowing how I'm doing something doesn't mean you can actually do anything about it. You lost the moment you became trapped within my jutsu. As though trying to prove her point, the girl disappeared again, and again, Rock Lee and Niji were assailed by what felt like hundreds of blades cutting into their skin all at once. The two cried out. However, that was all they could do as they were assaulted by their foe, who moved so fast she was basically invisible. Then the assault ended again. Niji and Rock Lee were even more wounded than before. Please surrender, the girl said. A good shinobi would know when to give up. Niji and Rock Lee grimaced as they tried to figure out what they could do, but really, against a foe like this, there wasn't much they could do. She was too fast for their eyes to follow. Even if they were skilled at taijutsu, it wouldn't matter if they couldn't even see her. And then, as if to give a ray of hope in this dark situation, a voice called out to them. Take em off, Lee. I give you permission. Ten-tailed wolf. Now that Rock Lee and Niji were trapped within the ice mirror's jutsu, Ten was being forced to deal with the other two on her own. She was doing surprisingly well. The blue-haired one was a close-range fighter, while the other was a mid to close-range fighter. Neither were very good at long range, which gave her a small advantage, though it wasn't much of one. Tenten could unleash a barrage of various sharp and pointy implements to keep them away. However, keeping them away was really all she could do. None of her projectiles could hit her opponents. If the ninjutsu user didn't erect walls of water to block her attacks, then the one using tonfa blades batted her projectiles away with extreme ease. She had tried using explosive notes, but her enemies caught onto her and avoided those weapons. Sadly, it didn't look like she had many explosives notes to begin with, so she was using them sparingly. Of course, the struggle between Tenten and her two opponents was only a sideshow to the one taking place inside the dome of ice mirrors. "She's better at using the demonic ice mirrors than me," Haku said quietly. Akane shrugged. "You were a lot more focused on your abilities as a hunter nin than your Kekkei Genkai. It looks like that girl has trained her body to an extremely high degree. She can use that jutsu better than you only because she's stronger than you, plain and simple. I guess." It was true that Oyuki was a lot better at Haku when it came to using her jutsu, though it was more that she could move between the mirrors a lot more quickly. However, she also had more mirrors, and they were packed so tightly together that no one could escape from there unless they could destroy a mirror. Since the mirrors could regenerate, it would take someone destroying them in a single attack to break one. And that's when a voice called out. "Take em off, Lee. I give you permission." Ten-tailed wolf, yes, Geizensei. Suddenly jumping to his feet as though he hadn't just suffered numerous small cuts, Rock Lee grinned as he sat on the water and rolled down his leg warmers. What lay underneath were ankle weights. Gleaming with the dullness of steel, the weights didn't look like much. Oyuki even commented on that fact. "Do you really think that dropping a couple of pounds will be enough to dash?" That was all she got out. Rock Lee had just thrown the weights at her ice dome. She, along with probably everyone else, could do little more than gawk at the two ice mirrors that suddenly shattered as the weight struck them. What's more, the weights didn't stop there. They continued moving until they struck the arena walls. A loud rumble echoed all around them as the area where the weight struck shook. The walls dented, cracks spreading out, and a cloud of dust billowed from them. Ten-tailed wolf Anko wondered if she was the only one feeling shock at what she had just witnessed. She looked around. Nope. Both Kurenai and Asuma were gaping at the two giant dents in the wall, and Asuma had even lost his cigarette, which had fallen to the floor. Even Kakashi had stopped reading. However, instead of staring at Rock Lee or the weights, he was giving Guy a look of mild reproach. "Guy, don't tell me you taught him that." "I did indeed. You know how dangerous that is. Your student could get seriously hurt." Guy did not look the least bit apologetic. Rock Lee's greatest dream is to become a splendid shinobi despite the fact that he can use neither ninjutsu nor genjutsu. I support his dream. That is why I taught him this technique. Of course, I have set limits and told him to never use it unless it's to protect something precious to him, but I wanted to give him the keys to success. While it was clear to Enko that Kakashi was not satisfied with that explanation, the copy ninja didn't say anything. Enko turned back to the battle. It was sure to get interesting now. Ten-tailed wolf, oh, my. Mei Terumi held a hand to her mouth as though to hide her shock. I had no idea that there were genin who were this strong. You truly do have some impressive ninja, Sarutobi. Sarutobi's chest swelled with pride. Thank you. I like to think all my genin have the potential to be great. Indeed. While the Kazekage said nothing, the way he gripped the armrest of his seat was very telling. Ten-tailed wolf up in the competitor's booth, the various ninja competing in the tournament were giving off varied reactions. Most of them seemed to be displaying some form of shock. There were many mouths that had dropped and eyes that had widened. Of course, there were a few, like Sasuke, who were grinning as they stared down at the arena floor. Gaara's crazy slasher smile was probably the creepiest look of all. "Well. That was unexpected," Akane said. "It seems the battle is going to get even more interest." "Do you really think taking off those weights is going to change anything?" asked Haku. "I mean, they definitely weighed a lot, but—" "It's certainly possible," Naruto began, "especially when you consider how much weight Rock Lee must have had on him. There's a very good chance that with however many hundreds of pounds he just dropped, Rock Lee might be able to keep up with Oyuki in speed when she's using those ice mirrors." It didn't look like Haku quite believed him, but he turned his attention back to the battle regardless. He was most definitely interested in seeing what happened next. They all were. What happened within the next few minutes would decide the outcome of this fight. Ten-tailed Wolf Tenten had been playing defensively from the moment Niji and Rock Lee were trapped inside of that ice dome. That was only natural. She was now fighting two people, both of whom excelled at close-range combat and one who could use mid-range ninjutsu to supplement her talent with a katana. Everything from water bullets to water dragons had been launched at Tenten. While she'd managed to avoid taking damage through the cunning use of her ninja scrolls, she was down to her last one. This was really not good. Water release, water tornado jutsu. Geysers of water erupted on her left and right, spinning and twisting until they had become a tornado of violent energy. Tenten knew of a method to break these cyclones. However, before she could even break out her twin scimitars, the blue-haired gal with the blade Tunfaz used her distracted state to close the distance. Using nothing more than a pair of kunai, Tenten fought against the other genin. Blue Hair, as Tenten had taken to calling her, was exceedingly good at using her weapons. She spun in elegant circles to make her blades appear from within hidden angles that were nearly impossible to see until it was too late. Only her skills as a weapon user allowed Tenten to avoid these attacks. Her arm shook as she swung her kunai. The blade Tonfa coming at her from the left was deftly redirected over her head as she took a step back. This didn't deter Blue Hair. Spinning around again, she attacked with her other Tonfa from the right, but it was just a feint. Tenten could see the minute twitching of her opponent's left shoulder. The moment she raised her kunai to block, that would be the moment Blue Hair unleashed her real attack. Leaping back, Tenten avoided the other girl's real attack by putting distance between them. She tossed the kunai at Blue Hair to keep the genin from closing the distance immediately, which allowed her to bring out her twin scimitars. It was just in time too. Both Blue Hair and Black Hair came at her in a pincer attack. The key to fighting a Tunon close-range battle was not to engage them both at the same time, but to fight so they could only take her one at a time. Tenten continued dancing backward along the water's surface. She maneuvered herself so that she was never confronted with the two genin at once. Her blade sparked against the weapons of her foes, while sweat poured down her forehead from the concentration necessary to keep her eyes on both opponents. This wasn't a battle to achieve victory. This was a battle to buy time. "Come on, you two. What's taking so long?" Sadly, Tenten forgot something during her battle with the two Kiri genin, but it wasn't until she had been backed against one of the cyclones that she realized it. These jutsu that Black Hair had created were still active. It was only now, as she stood with her back against the cyclone and the two genin closing in, that she finally understood it. She had been led into a trap. Yet before the trap could be fully strung, something finally happened. A loud crashing sound echoed all around them, causing Black Hair and Blue Hair to stop their assault, and then something whizzed past them, blowing back their hair. Tenten squawked when that same something nearly struck her in the face. Instead, however, it smashed into the water tornado behind her, tearing it apart before continuing on. It didn't stop until it struck the wall, denting it. "What the hell was that?" shouted Blue Hair. Tenten looked behind her to see what it was. A weight. A leg weight. It was one of Rock Lee's leg weights, now embedded into the wall. So he finally took them off. It was about time. Looking back at the ice dome, Ten was just in time to witness every single ice mirror shatter at the same exact time. It wasn't clear why. Not at first. However, as she studied the situation, Ten realized that the reason was because of Rock Lee. Shadow of the Dancing Leaf was a technique where someone appeared behind an airborne opponent, mimicking how their body was positioned, just like a leaf that danced in the air as it was followed by its own shadow. In that same vein, Rock Lee was behind the orange-haired woman. The bandages that had been around his arms came undone and wrapped around Orange Hair as he oriented them both so they were pointed head first at the water below. And then they began to spin. Ten had only seen Rock Lee use this technique once. It was when Geizensei had taught him how to do it, and she had never seen it done on an opponent before. Watching as Rock Lee and the one trapped in his embrace spun faster and faster, until they looked like a miniature cyclone, she could understand why. Just before they struck the water, Rock Lee kicked himself away from Orange Hair. The massive geyser that was kicked into the air was 20 times bigger than anything she had seen so far. It put all of Black Hair's water ninjutsu to shame. It was definitely a finishing move. No way. Black Hair mumbled. That brat defeated Oriyuki's demonic ice mirrors. Knowing that now wasn't the time to be impressed, Ten pulled out her last remaining scroll, unfurled it, and activated the seal inside with her blood. She couldn't let Rock Lee do all the work. If she could just take out one of these two, it would be enough. Because she only had one scroll left, she couldn't use Twin Rising Dragon, which required 2 scrolls. Nonetheless, she leapt into the air as she unsealed everything inside of her scroll and sent it at the two. Every weapon imaginable, from kunai to kusarigama, were thrown at the pair. Of course, these two were not inexperienced brats. They showed their ability to adapt and respond to changes in the situation with admirable swiftness. While Blue Hair used her blade tonfas to bat aside the weapons aimed at her, Black Hair created a water wall that blocked the weapons for her. Ten landed back on the ground, and neither of the two had been hurt. But that was okay. I hope you didn't think that a surprise attack like that would be enough to guarantee you victory, Blue Hair said. I didn't, Ten admitted with a smile. That was just a distraction. What? Black Hair looked confused. You are within my range of divination, Niji said from behind Black Hair, who only had enough time to turn around before Niji was upon her. 2 palm. A strike to the stomach made her double over. 4 palms. Niji struck her chest, pushing her up, and then struck the underside of her chin, making her back arc 8 palms. Several more strikes hit Black Hair with merciless intent. 16 palms. Niji was relentless as he unleashed 16 more strikes that made Black Hair's body jerk back and forth with spastic motions. 32 palms. Ten would have winced as blood flew from the woman's mouth, but when she thought about the ringer she'd been put through, she found no sympathy. 64 palms. By this point, Niji's hands couldn't even be seen. They were just blurs of movement. The woman on the receiving end was already defeated. Her body was like a doll that could only move because it was being kept in place by Niji's strikes. 8 trigrams 64 palms. When Niji finally finished attacking the woman, having unleashed 64 strikes with his gentle fist style, he stepped back. Black Hair remained standing. Her eyes were dead and her shoulders slouched. Barely a second passed before she tilted backward, falling into the water and remaining there. I've sealed off all 64 Tenketsu points in your body, Niji said. You'll live, but you won't be getting back up anytime soon. Yum! Blue Hair shouted. Knowing a chance when she saw one, Ten lifted her hands and released chakra through her fingers. During the battle, she had attached strings to all of her weapons. Now that Blue Hair was distracted, she manipulated those strings with chakra, causing all of the weapons she had flung, all 1,000 of them, to rise at once. They surrounded her opponent, who only now realized the danger she was in. Too late. Ten made them all converge on the woman. She had to give the girl credit. Blue Hair did an amazing job knocking away a lot of her weapons. However, she could only strike so many at any given time, about a dozen at once. There were over 1,000. It wasn't long before cuts started appearing on Blue Hair's skin, and soon after that, Blue Hair was literally buried underneath a pile of weapons. Because Ten didn't want to kill her, she made sure all the strikes were non-lethal, but she still wanted to win. That was why she knocked the girl unconscious with a strike to the head using the flat end of a sword. As the girl fell into the water, Ten let her weapons drop as well. The battle was over. Yash. Ten. Niji. You two did a splendid job with those two ninja, Rock Lee said as he wandered over to them. He was limping. It was probably from exhaustion. Using the front lotus required him to open one of the 8 gates, which caused fatigue after its use. Was there ever any doubt? Asked Niji. These opponents were not worth the effort. Ten sighed at Niji's arrogance. Long ago, she used to think he was so cool, back during their academy days. Now that she knew Niji better, all of the feelings of awe she used to have were now gone. Niji was kind of a prick. That put a huge damper on her feelings. Seeing that the battle was concluded, the proctor raised his hand. The winner of this battle is Team Guy. Ten-tailed Wolf Sarutobi could not help but feel pride swell in his chest as he clapped for the excellent battle that had been put on. While comparatively speaking, it was not the best battle ever, for a team of genin, it was incredible. You really do have a lot of talent among your genin this year. Mei was also clapping. Despite the loss her genin had taken, there was a smile on your face. While their ability to adapt could use some work, their teamwork was quite something, especially during the beginning where they stood toe-a-toe with my genin. Thank you, Lord Mizukichi. Humph. Raza was also clapping, but unlike Mei, he didn't appear particularly enthusiastic. They might have won this battle, but their teamwork leaves much to be desired. While not as bad as the other team, Team Guy wasn't able to utilize a single combination jutsu or even use an advanced formation. Knowing that Raza was always grumpy like this, Sarutobi didn't let the man's words bother him. Besides that, it wasn't like the Kazekage was completely wrong, though if he was being honest, he felt like Raza was expecting too much from inexperienced genin. Then again, he might just be grouchy. Perhaps, but I believe you are putting too much emphasis on tactics that only jonin have really mastered. Sarutobi looked down at the arena as Niji, Rock Lee, and Ten slowly made their way out through one of the doors. You should also know already that Team Guy is not a team with an emphasis on ninjutsu. In fact, not one member on that team knows how to use traditional ninjutsu, so they couldn't use combination jutsu even if they wanted to. They were created as a group of taijutsu specialists. Ten provides long-range support, while Niji and Rock Lee overwhelm their enemies with two vastly different types of taijutsu. And it was clear that they knew their roles well, Mei added. In the beginning of the battle, they did exactly that. What's more, there is a clear level of trust between them. When Niji and Rock Lee were trapped within Oriyuki's demonic ice mirrors, Ten played a defensive battle, biding her time instead of overreacting to save them. She clearly had faith that they would break out. I was impressed. I suppose you make a good point, Raza sighed. In truth, I do envy the trust those three have in each other. While I doubt they'll win against Gaara, there's no denying that the Suna team competing in this tournament lacks teamwork. I'm sure it is something they will learn in time. Sarutobi smiled congenially. For now, let us watch the rest of the battles. Ten-tailed Wolf, will teams Ten and Samui please come down to the arena, the proctor called as the Kiri genin were taken away on several stretchers. Up in the competitors' booth, the two teams that would be competing presented completely different emotional facades. While Karui and Ino looked enthusiastic enough, with one giving a grinning leer and the other a bright smile complete with shining blue eyes, none of the others seemed as gung-ho. Choji was still eating, Omoi had a vaguely contemplative appearance, Samui hadn't changed from her cool demeanor at all, and Shikamaru was complaining. "Man, why did our turn have to come up next?" he asked of no one in particular. "I don't want to fight right now. I don't want to fight at all." He turned to his blonde comrade. "Hey, Ino. You mind if we just forfeit?" Smack. "What are you saying, Shika? We can't forfeit now." Ino glared down at Shikamaru, who was bent over after being smacked in the back of the head. There was a small bump rising from his cranium, where Ino had hit him. "This is our chance to prove that we're worthy of becoming Chunin. Don't you want to rise through the ranks?" "Not really." Shikamaru straightened up and rubbed the back of his head. "Rising through the ranks sounds troublesome." Ino's response was to roll her eyes at the typical Shikamaru remark. "We don't mind if you give up," Karui said with a grin. "It's not like you three will be able to do anything to us anyway. Giving up will save you some embarrassment later on down the road." Ino switched from glaring at Shikamaru to glaring at Karui. "There's no way we're gonna give up. We'll cream your team. Isn't that right, you two?" Despite trying to pump up her teammates, the responses she got were less than enthusiastic. Shikamaru yawned and Choji just kept eating. Ino's sweat dropped. "Way to show your passion. Seriously, you two. Your desire to prove yourselves is just overflowing." "Troublesome," Shikamaru muttered. Despite having what was essentially a small pissing contest in the competitors' booth, though only Ino and Karui were involved in it, the two teams did eventually leave. Naruto watched them go from the sidelines with Akane and Haku. None of the other teams were paying much attention. Team 7, in particular, didn't seem to care about this battle. That was their loss. "What do you think?" asked Akane. "This is a tough one." Naruto crossed his arms and leaned against the guardrail. "Team Samui is definitely stronger and more experienced. Not only are they older, but the way they carry themselves shows they've been through more than most genin. However, if Shikamaru can become properly motivated, then there's a good chance that Team 10 can match Team Samui by using superior tactics." "Is Shikamaru really that amazing of a ninja?" asked Haku. "Of course not." Naruto snorted. "Shikamaru is a lazy bastard who won't do any more than is strictly necessary. And sometimes not even that. However, he does have one thing going for him that I doubt Team Samui or anyone else will be expecting." As Akane and Haku leaned in, and even a few of the other genin teams started listening to his words, Naruto grinned. This was going to be good. Ten-tailed wolf. The two teams took to the field. While Team Samui stood on the water, Team 10 took one of the small islands that dotted the arena. This was a smart move. Water walking required ninja to constantly expel chakra through the feet, and the amount could change depending on things like the current and other factors, which meant if someone didn't have a lot of chakra, they could expend it all very quickly if they weren't careful. None of Team 10 had the kind of capacity required to fight while water walking. The proctor stood between the two teams. He looked at them both. "Are both teams ready?" he asked. He received nods from Team Samui, but the best he got from Team 10 was a yawn from Shikamaru, who received a smack to the back of the head from Ino. With sweat dripping down his face, the proctor raised his hand and said, "Then, if both teams are ready, let's get this started. On 1, 2, 3. Fight." Ten-tailed wolf. While it was troublesome, Shikamaru did indeed have a plan, which he explained to Ino and Choji on the way to the arena. He didn't think it would be enough to net them victory. That said, victory was not, in itself, a requirement for this tournament. What they needed to do was showcase their skills, both as individuals and as a team. Individually, Team 10 was weak. However, their teamwork was second to none. "Quick, Choji!" Shikamaru shouted. "Right!" Choji clapped his hands together. The noise rang out within the arena. Expansion Jutsu. The Akamichi clan was sometimes called a clan of fatties because of how much they ate and how they were all overweight. However, their jutsu, which were passed down through the clan, relied on their weight to work. By converting the calories they had consumed into chakra, they could use a variety of techniques known only to them. The expansion jutsu was one of those techniques. Before the very eyes of Team Samui and everyone else, Choji's body exploded, not in the literal sense, but in the sense that he expanded like a balloon. His body became huge. It was easily 5 times bigger than it had been, and it was round. Very round. He looked like a giant meatball. Karui pointed and laughed. What kind of technique is that? It looks like he just got fatter than he already is. Steam poured from Choji's nose as he snorted. I'm not fat. Oh, boy. Choji's angry. Shikamaru grimaced. I hope he doesn't forget the plan. Tucking in his limbs, including his head, Choji expelled chakra from his body, which blasted from the holes now in his clothing as steam. After leaping into the air, he was launched forward, propelled by chakra. He hit the ground hard enough to dent it. Then he shot forward at a speed one wouldn't expect a person of his size to move. He rolled so fast that he actually shot across the water's surface. Human boulder. What the hell? Karui shouted in shock. Jump. Samui said. They clearly hadn't expected this kind of attack. They didn't even have time to counter with a ninjutsu, though if they had tried, Shikamaru had a counterplan for that. As it was, Samui, Omoi, and Karui leapt out of the way. While Samui simply leapt to the side, Karui jumped high into the air and hung there. Omoi also followed Samui's example, but Choji, sticking to the plan, chased after him. Good. I need Choji to keep that one occupied. Ino. On it. Ino held out her hands and formed something resembling a circle with her thumbs, forefingers, and middle fingers. She adjusted where she was aiming her hands. Shikamaru knew that she was putting Karui in her sights. Ninja art, mind transfer jutsu. Mind transfer jutsu was a self-explanatory technique. By sending their mind as spiritual energy into a target's body, they could supplant the target's mind with their own, transferring their consciousness to the target, which gave them complete control over the body for a short period of time. It was normally used for intelligence-gathering missions, but it could theoretically be used in battle. That said, using it for combat could be dangerous as the drawbacks made it not always worth the risk. Shikamaru's plan called for them to risk it. As the mind transfer jutsu activated, Ino's body began to topple over. Without a consciousness, there was nothing keeping it standing. Shikamaru caught her before she could fall and gently set her on the ground. Standing back up, he kept an eye on all 3 opponents. Samui was standing several feet away. Karui, or rather, Ino in Karui's body, had landed on the water and was trying to adjust the chakra on her feet. Meanwhile, Choji was keeping Omoi occupied. Once Ino got a handle on the amount of chakra she needed to stay standing, a grin appeared on hers, Karui's, face. Unsheathing the long katana behind her back, she raced toward Omoi, who didn't even see her coming until his head was nearly severed from his body. He just barely managed to avoid her attack by ducking, but then he almost got squashed when Choji tried to roll him over. What is going on? Karui. I didn't say anything this time, so why are you attacking me? Omoi asked. Sorry. Karui grinned. But your teammate isn't in here right now. Please try again later. After you lose. Ino charged at Omoi and attacked him with the katana. Of course, it was clear that she didn't know how to wield it properly. She might have been using Karui's body, but she could only use the skills she knew. It wasn't like she could use Karui's skills. As it was, her swings were haphazard and easy to dodge. But that's what Choji was there for. Ino didn't really bother trying to hit Omoi, and instead she swung the katana with the intent of maneuvering Omoi into a position where Choji could attack him. Several times he was almost flattened like a pancake. However, each time he managed to avoid it, if just barely. Shikamaru frowned. The plan worked perfectly in the beginning, but I can already see the problem. That problem being that their level in individual skills was too great. Omoi was simply a better fighter than either Ino or Choji. He was more nimble, had more chakra, was better at fighting in close range, and was more experienced than either of them. Even if she and Choji used perfect teamwork, it was still unlikely that they would win. But winning wasn't necessary to achieve victory here. It was during this time that Samui acted. Shikamaru caught her out of the corner of his eye racing toward him and Ino, which he had expected. He didn't respond to her, pretended not to see her, as he made hand seals for his own ninjutsu. From the angle of her run and the direction in which she was traveling, the blonde woman obviously intended to deal with Ino. She probably knew that whatever had happened to Karui was because of his teammate. That was also something he had included in his plans. Shikamaru pretended he was going to protect Ino by fighting Samui, which caused the woman to leap over him. As she soared through the air, flipping around, she unsheathed her tanto and angled her descent and prepared to pierce Ino with it. Ninja Art, Shadow Possession Jutsu. Samui's sword stopped just inches from Ino's shoulder. Since killing wasn't allowed, it looked like she had been aiming to injure his teammate, which would have disrupted the technique by forcing Ino's mind back into her body. What? Samui's body shook for a moment as she struggled to move, but that was about all she could do. What's going on? My body won't move. Of course not, Shikamaru said. He stood up. Samui also stood up, and when Shikamaru turned around, so too did she. Now facing each other, the blonde lady could do nothing as he grinned at her. Did you really think I would let you harm my precious teammate? Ten-tailed wolf, oh. Mei leaned forward in her seat, her eyes widening as she stared down at the new development that had just taken place. What a marvelous display of tactical brilliance. A hushed silence had fallen over the stadium as everyone else tried to figure out what was going on. While it was doubtful that any of the spectators really understood the tactical genius had just taken place, those who did, those who understood tactics and combat, wouldn't fail to be impressed by what they had witnessed. That boy. He is quite the genius, isn't he? Mei said. That's Shikamaru Nara, Sarutobi said as he puffed on his pipe. He's a rare genius that only comes every so often. Of course, he is from the Nara clan, who have been known to produce brilliant tacticians, but even among them, he is a cut above the rest. I must confess to being impressed, Raza said, giving the first straight compliment ever. That Nara boy accurately judged the situation and his opponents with only a cursory observation, and then made a plan to neutralize all three of them utilizing the unique talents of himself and his fellow teammates. By this point, the battle had slowed down some. Choji and Ino, who had transferred to Karui's body, were keeping Omoi occupied by engaging him in combat. They forced him to fight defensively by always presenting Karui as the target. The young ninja from Kyumo couldn't attack without fear of injuring his comrade, which kept him from being able to do anything more than dodge. I am assuming this is the newest incarnation of the Ino Shikacho trio, Raza continued. I recognize that teamwork. While the tactical formation is different, this is definitely reminiscent to the previous trio, who so skillfully used their individual talents together to such great effect during the Third Shinobi War. They are indeed the latest Ino Shikacho team, Sarutobi admitted. I've heard about them. Mei crossed her arms, which made her chest jiggle. While their individual skills make them dangerous, it's their teamwork that really make them such fearsome opponents. I never expected to see this sort of teamwork during the Chunin exam. Even though they are genin, these three act with the same level of teamwork as Chunin or even Jonin. That's very kind of you to say, Sarutobi said. However, there is a problem, Raza interjected. Mei and Sarutobi turned to him. While there is no denying that these three are excellent when it comes to working together, it's also clear that none of them have the skills or power necessary to bring out their team's full potential. As if to emphasize Raza's point, Samui began moving again. It was slowly, as though her body was moving through frozen molasses, but it was definitely inching closer to Ino's body, which still lay unconscious on the ground. Even from this distance, Sarutobi could see the sweat beating down from Shikamaru's forehead as he tried to keep the one caught within his shadow from moving. As much as I hate to admit it, I do believe you are correct. Sarutobi sighed. This battle is coming to a conclusion. Ten-tailed wolf Shikamaru had already known that this would happen. He had been hoping that Ino and Choji could take care of Omoi before he ran out of chakra, but it seemed that wasn't going to be. Omoi had been skillfully avoiding all of their attacks. It was to be expected. Omoi was a skilled swordsman who had been trained in close-range combat. Among his team, only Choji knew how to fight at close range, but sadly, his style of fighting was ill-suited toward battling against a swordsman of Omoi's caliber. What's more, Ino had absolutely no talent at fighting, yet there she was, trying to battle against someone who specialized in close-quarters combat. They had done a good job so far, but it looked like this was the end. We surrender. Shikamaru raised his hand as he broke his jutsu. Having been working really hard to break free of the jutsu, Samui stumbled forward for a step before righting herself. Shikamaru ignored the way she gawked at him. We surrender. This battle is lost. For the first time since this exam had begun, Samui seemed shocked. Utterly flabbergasted. Her eyes had grown to the size of a fist, and her mouth was slowly coming unhinged. You're surrendering? Samui asked. That's right, Shikamaru said with an uncaring tone as Ino's body suddenly jerked. It looked like she'd ejected her spirit from Karui. Samui still looked confused. But you had us all right where you wanted us. I did, but that doesn't mean we could win. Shikamaru placed his hands in his pockets as Ino sat up. My entire plan hinged on Ino and Chuji being able to defeat Omoi before I ran out of chakra. However, your teammate proved that just because someone is using the body of a highly trained close combat specialized, it doesn't mean they know how to fight. He was simply better than Ino and Chuji. I'm running low on chakra, Ino could only stay in Karui's body for a few more minutes, and Chuji might be strong, but he can't defeat someone that's swift on his own. I would have only lasted a minute more, maybe two, but once that happened, you would have won anyway. The calm analysis, brought about in a lazy tone of voice, made even Samui look on in shocked wonder. Besides, Shikamaru raised his hands and placed them behind his head. Fighting any longer would be way too troublesome. Ten-tailed wolf up in the stands, Asuma facepalmed. That boy. He's might be a genius, but he's the laziest person I've ever seen. But it's not like he was wrong either, Kakashi said. He had long since snapped his book shut. It seemed even the copy ninja was intrigued by the battle that had taken place down below. It was obvious that he was running out of chakra. In a situation like this, his best option would have been to make a tactical withdrawal. In this case, surrendering is really the only thing he can do. I know. Asuma sighed. But I still don't like how lazy he is. I'm afraid that can't be helped. Kakashi shrugged. After all, even if he doesn't want to fight because doing so is too trouble, he also has a sound reason for not continuing. He might be lazy, Enko began adding her to Rio, but he also displayed the actions and decision-making qualities of a Chunin. I'm pretty sure he's going to be nominated, though I can't say if the other two will. Everyone nodded along with her words, even Asuma, though he looked reluctant. Ten-tailed wolf, the winner of this round is Team Samui. Even though Samui and her team had technically won, this did not feel like a victory to her, and if the grumbling complaints of Karui were anything to go by, then she did not approve of this victory either. Likewise, the stands were completely silent as the people who had been watching tried to figure out what had happened. They were no doubt confused by how the battle had proceeded. To them it must have looked like Shikamaru and his team were the ones who were on the cusp of victory, so for them to just surrender like this no doubt left many befuddled. Even as she looked at the stands, Samui could see the confused faces of the guests, who were all talking to each other. "I can't believe this," Karui complained as she stood beside Samui. "I feel totally gypped. This wasn't a victory. Those assholes played with us, and then gave up." "I understand how you feel," Omoi said as he sucked on the lollipop in his mouth. "It doesn't really feel like we won at all. That team completely trounced us. If it wasn't for the fact that they are individually weaker and have less chakra, we wouldn't have won. Will Teams Suna and Akiha please come down to the arena floor?" the proctor called out. Since they were no longer needed, Samui, Omoi, and Karui left the arena floor and entered a long hallway. They took several stairs that led to the third floor, where the competitor's booth was located. As they were walking down the third floor hall, the team from Suna walked past them. While none of them did anything, a chill passed over Samui's spine when the redhead eyed her, though he didn't do anything and was walking past them seconds later. Samui paused as she turned her head to watch as the redhead and his two teammates disappeared down the stairs. "What's wrong, Samui?" asked Omoi, having stopped when he realized that she was no longer walking with them. "It's nothing." Samui shook her head and caught up with her two teammates. However, even though she didn't say anything, something about that genin from Suna with the red hair really bothered her. Ten-tailed wolf. The battle hadn't started yet, though both teams were now on the arena floor. Given what had happened with the previous battle, the spectators were understandably anxious to see something exciting. Even from the competitor's booth, the clamor from those who wanted to see a good fight could be heard clearly. It seemed the previous battle had been so baffling that it left them unsatisfied. "Are you sure telling them about Gaara was a wise idea?" asked Haku. Naruto, Akane, and Haku were standing a little further removed from everyone else. Well, Naruto had opted to sit on the guardrail, his feet dangling over the railing. Akane was leaning against it. Meanwhile, Haku stood back a little ways, arms crossed and frowning. "I don't see why it wouldn't be." Naruto shrugged. "It's not like we owe Gaara or Suna anything, and since Old Man Hokage has signed a treaty to ally ourselves with Kirigakure, we could consider me telling Akiha that Gaara is a Jinchuriki, a part of our job as allies. Besides, Gaara is clearly unstable. There's no telling what will happen out there. It's better that they know about this for their own safety. If you say so. Akiha and her team have the advantage here." Akane thoughtfully rubbed her chin as the two teams emerged from separate entrances and walked onto the field. Since this entire arena is filled to the brim with water, Gaara won't have as much sand to work with. Shikaku's ability is controlling sand, which is why that boy keeps a gourd on his back. However, with the arena being like this, he's limited in the amount of sand he can use outside of that gourd. She paused, and then added. "Maybe if he grinds up one of those islands, he'll have more, but then he runs the risk of mixing mud into his sand, which will slow it down." "Then you think Team Akiha has a shot of winning?" asked Haku. "They definitely have a good chance." Naruto placed his elbows on his knees and set his face on the butt of his hands. The two teams were now standing across from each other. Gaara's two teammates stood on an island, while Gaara himself floated on an island of sand from his gourd. Team Akiha were all standing on the water. The battlefield has stacked the odds in their favor. It'll probably come down to whether or not they can neutralize Gaara's sand long enough to score a victory. The proctor stood between teams Akiha and Suna. He studied the two teams with keen eyes, though he seemed particularly wary of Suna's team, or rather, the redhead. Naruto was betting that he probably already knew about Gaara being a Jinchuriki. "Are both teams ready?" He received an affirmation from everyone. Nodding to himself, he raised his hand. Then, Fight. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like, share and subscribe. This is Raven Sage signing off.